Yum brand operates more than 50,000 restaurants across the globe, and despite its lack of visibility, if you drive through just about every American town, you'll see clear evidence of its existence. Its story isn't one of small-town success gone national, though. Yum Brands was set up to succeed from the beginning, and it's done just that, but not without leaving the occasional nasty scandal in its wake. Based in Louisville, Kentucky, Yum Brands is one of the world's largest fast food restaurant companies. But how did it come to be that way? And where did it all start? However big Yum Brands may currently be, it originally had its roots in an even bigger mammoth company, PepsiCo. In 1986, 34 years after Colonel Sanders began his Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise at retirement age, it was bought up by PepsiCo. 1 decade earlier, PepsiCo had already bought up 2 other fast food chains too. First, Pizza Hut in 1977, followed by Taco Bell 1 year later. Noticing the huge potential, PepsiCo wanted to venture into the seemingly lucrative world of fast food. But although restaurants made up to 36% of its portfolio, they only accounted for about 22% or $3.7 billion of profit. After realizing the underperforming restaurant chains were making them lose money and time, PepsiCo decided to focus on soft drinks and Frito-Lay snacks instead. And the previously acquired fast food restaurants were spun off into their own company called Tricon Global Restaurants. Now Tricon had taken over, and PepsiCo was no longer in charge. Well, kind of, because despite handing over the reins, it never quite broke all its ties with its beloved fast food chains. But more on that in a bit. Although its foundation can be traced back all the way to PepsiCo making its first restaurant purchase in 1977, Yum Brands wasn't actually a thing at all until 2002. That's when Tricon changed its name to, you can probably guess it, Yum Brands. They thought the new name would reflect the brand's fun culture and their goal of putting a yum on customers' faces all around the world. And the same year of the big name change, Yum Brands also acquired Yorkshire Global Restaurants. Yorkshire is the owner of the root beer chain A&W and the seafood chain Long John Silver. And the merger added thousands of A&W and Long John Silver's restaurants to Yum's portfolio. The hope was that it would result in an added $5 billion in sales. And just like most other Yum Brands restaurants, Pepsi was the main drink that was being sold at Long John Silver's. Ever wondered why Burger King and McDonald's have Coca-Cola, while most KFCs, Pizza Huts, and Taco Bell serve Pepsi? Well, as with most things in business, there's a good reason for that. Remember how we said that PepsiCo didn't completely break its ties with its previously owned restaurants? Due to Yum Brands being a divestment spin-off from PepsiCo, all of its fast food chains have a lifetime contract with Pepsi. And this is why you can only find Pepsi products at most Yum Brands restaurants. Then, 2 years after rebranding themselves, Yum began experimenting with a cafeteria-style restaurant called East Dawning in Shanghai, China. By then, China already boasted some 1,000 KFC outlets, and East Dawning combined the famous KFC business model with Chinese cuisine. This was just the beginning of Yum Brands' near decade-and-a-half period of expansion into the Chinese market. But unfortunately, its success back home wouldn't remain as strong. Despite the hopes of additional sales and value, things didn't really work out between Yum Brands and Long John Silver's and A&W. And after 9 years, it decided to sell the restaurants. The explanation? Yum Brands was more into pushing its overseas growth, and the two chains just didn't fit in with its overall goals. Long John Silver's and A&W aren't the only brands that Yum has picked up and dumped over the years. They're just the most well-known, and other brands that have gotten the boot include Backyard Burgers and Pasta Bravo. In China, it was a different story, however. Ever since their initial expansion with the East Dawning cafeteria in Shanghai in 2004, China had always been a rather large market for Yum Brands. But by 2016, it was clear that its China operations were actually big enough to form their own corporation. And so, Yum China was born. As a spin-off of a spin-off, Yum Brands China is basically the business version of Inception. And as it functions as an independent company, it boasts exclusive rights to operating KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell locations in the country. Currently, Yum China claims that Pizza Hut is China's top casual dining restaurant brand, while KFC is the top quick service restaurant brand. And the numbers seem to agree with those statements. Nowhere else outside of the US has KFC expanded as quickly as in China. And since the first KFC opened in Beijing in 1987, the chain had an average growth of 50% per year. On top of KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell, Yum China also operates Yum Brands China-specific chains, such as East Dawning and the hot pot restaurant chain Little Sheep. And they've all been massively successful. It is said that at one point, Yum China was opening up a new restaurant every 18 hours. And from a single restaurant in 1987, the company now operates over 11,000 restaurants in more than 1,600 Chinese cities and towns, spanning every province and autonomous region across mainland China. Now that's a lot! But along the way, a few nasty scandals had to be overcome. Despite its major success in China, Yum Brands hasn't always had an easy journey in the country. And during its initial years, it had quite some damage control to do. It began in 2013, when the corporation was accused of using tainted meat in its Chinese locations. More specifically, it was said that their chicken contained excess levels of chemical residue. A powerful state media outlet accused local KFC suppliers of cramming extra antibiotics and steroids into their chickens, and after experiencing a 6% decline in sales, it took Yum the better part of a year to get back on solid footing in China. Then came the next big meat scandal in 2014, and this time, all American fast food chains throughout China would be involved. It began when a broadcaster secretly filmed inside a Shanghai Husi Food, a food supplier that provided chicken and beef to not only KFC and Pizza Hut, but also McDonald's, Papa John's, and Burger King. The footage captured workers touching the food with their bare hands and dropping it on the floor to return it directly to the processing machine. And some workers were even seen taking expired meat out of old packaging and repackaging it with new expiration dates. After the scandal surfaced, Yum cut off all ties with the food supplier. But that action gave consumers little consolation. And it surely wasn't enough to prevent the incident from making international headlines. And what made matters even worse is that this also wasn't the last time that Yum Brands came under fire for serving up harmful food. As Yum Brands currently operates in more than 150 different countries, its fast food prowess clearly isn't only limited to China. But its expansion into the West Bank and Mongolia were particularly noteworthy. When Yum took its eats to the West Bank in 2012, it opened the first American fast food restaurant ever in the Palestinian territory. But Yum Brands can't take all the credit for this feat though, as it all comes down to one especially daring entrepreneur, Adib Bakri. While Israeli franchise owners insisted Palestinians go through Israeli companies to open branch restaurants like KFC and Pizza Hut, Adib decided to do things a little differently. Rather than working with the Israeli franchise owners, he went straight to Yum Brands to get his own franchise. And while some people warned him that Palestinians would boycott the restaurants due to the United States' support of Israel, Adib was, once again, undeterred, noting that the only thing he sourced from the Americans was the franchise and the recipes. Everything else, from his employees to the food ingredients, is Palestinian. As there are now several KFC branches in Palestine alone, his daring idea can definitely be deemed a success. Then 1 year later, Yum Brands took its Western cuisine to Mongolia. The KFC restaurant in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar was one of the 5 planned for the country. with further plans to open more than a dozen other outlets throughout 2018. What made this so remarkable was that not only was the KFC restaurant the first for the brand in the country, but it was also the country's first Western fast food restaurant. And if that weren't enough, Yum Brands also introduced the drive-thru concept to Mongolian diners. Things were going well and the restaurants were a success. But then, disaster struck. After hundreds of patrons contracted food poisoning and more than 40 diners were hospitalized, all the Mongolian KFC restaurants were suspended. Things were looking bad, but after some much-needed damage control, the chain managed to salvage its reputation. Today, its Mongolian Instagram account boasts an active presence, and the brand recently opened its 14th KFC restaurant in the country. Today, Yum Brands is doing well. Despite the obstacles and scandals, it has managed to regain its foothold and reputation. And together with Yum China, it has grown to be one of the world's largest and most successful restaurant companies. It runs over 52,000 restaurants in more than 150 countries and territories. And even though Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell have all been incredibly successful, the brand continues to add other big restaurant chains to its name, with the Habit Burger Grill being its latest purchase. Since its spin-off from PepsiCo in 1997, Yum Brands has become a truly global company that's worth several billions of dollars. And its Yum China spin-off currently has one of the largest restaurant portfolios in the world's most populated country. Not bad at all. This was the story of Yum Brands. Had you already noticed its omnipresence before? And have you ever eaten in one of these many restaurants? Share it in the comments. And if there's a company that you would like us to cover next, make sure to share that too.